Everyone at the luxurious five-star Wellington Hotel was preparing for what was supposed to be one of the most important business visits of the entire year. The staff had been trained for weeks. The managers rehearsed every word they would say, and the atmosphere was filled with pressure and expectation. A billionaire guest from China was arriving, someone whose decisions could change the entire future of the hotel forever. Executives, directors, and employees stood on edge, trying to appear perfect, polished, and ready, though many were secretly anxious inside. When the honored guest finally entered the lobby and spoke his very first word, everything stopped. The room froze. The staff looked at one another, unsure how to respond, unsure if they should speak, move, or wait, until an unexpected voice came from someone no one had been paying attention to at all. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. At the Wellington Palace Hotel, everything had to be perfect that morning. The general manager, Mr. Harrison, was in full control, checking every small detail. The hotel was about to receive a very important guest, Mr. Zhang, a billionaire investor from China. His group was considering putting money into the hotel, and this visit could change everything. Harrison walked through the lobby giving sharp instructions. He told the staff to smile but not speak unless spoken to. He wanted the service to be perfect but almost invisible. When he noticed Olivia Thomas, a black cleaning employee working near the meeting area, he immediately told another staff member to move her elsewhere. He didn't want her seen by the investor. Harrison didn't think she fit the image he was trying to present. He didn't say it directly, but it was clear. Everyone followed his orders without questioning, because when Harrison was in charge, there was no room for mistakes. The hotel was completely transformed for the visit. Staff members were told to dress in their best uniforms, and the kitchen was working on a special menu that matched Chinese tastes. The temperature inside the hotel was adjusted several times to make sure it was just right, not too hot or too cold. The decorations had also been changed. Expensive-looking vases, art pieces, and cultural symbols were placed around the entrance and conference room. Harrison believed these little things would impress Mr. Zhang. He held his phone tightly in his hand, ready to use his translation app to speak with the guest. When someone on the team suggested hiring a real interpreter, Harrison refused. He believed technology was enough. "The app is good. It worked fine last time," he said with confidence. In truth, he didn't want to spend more money or seem unsure of himself. Everything was rehearsed. Nothing was left to chance. In the middle of all this preparation, Olivia Thomas kept doing her job quietly. She wore her cleaning uniform and carried her tools, moving from room to room with care. While others ignored her, she noticed everything. Olivia was not just a cleaner. She was smart, patient, and observant. No one knew she spoke fluent Mandarin. She had taught herself over time, studying during breaks and after work. She often carried technical books in her cleaning cart, hidden under cloths and supplies. These books were about business, languages, and hotel management. Olivia had dreams of growing, of doing more than cleaning. But in the eyes of most of the staff, she was invisible. She had learned not to speak unless spoken to, and she had gotten used to people walking past her without seeing her. But even though they didn't see her, Olivia saw them. She noticed how they acted, how they made decisions, and how they underestimated people like her. As Harrison gave final instructions, Olivia was working near the hallway that led to the main conference room. She moved quietly, wiping down surfaces and checking corners. She knew which areas would be seen by the investor and made sure they were spotless. Her movements were quick but smooth, never drawing attention. As she worked, she listened to Harrison talk to his team. "No mistakes today," he kept repeating. "We only have one chance to make a good impression." Olivia heard him mention the translation app again. She thought about saying something, offering to help, but then stopped herself. She knew what would happen. They would laugh or worse, they would be angry. So she stayed quiet. But inside she felt a mix of frustration and pride. She knew she could do so much more, yet no one gave her the chance. That morning, like many before, she did her work well, even though no one said thank you. Back in the staff room, Olivia took a short break. She reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out a book written in Mandarin. It was a guide to business etiquette in China. She had been reading it for weeks, making notes in the margins. She believed that understanding culture was just as important as speaking the language. While other employees relaxed or looked at their phones, Olivia studied. She imagined herself in a different position, maybe working in administration, maybe helping guests from other countries. But for now, that dream stayed in her mind. She heard someone calling her name and quickly put the book away. It wasn't allowed during work hours, even if she wasn't on the clock at that moment. As she returned to her duties, she reminded herself that knowledge was power. One day, she would find the right moment to show what she could do. Until then, she had to stay in the background. As the time for Mr. Yang's arrival got closer, the tension in the hotel increased. Harrison stood by the entrance with two other managers, watching the driveway. He double-checked the welcome gifts, the flower arrangements, and the order of events. Olivia passed by, pushing her cart down a side hallway. She was not supposed to be seen. She moved silently, making sure everything looked perfect. She peeked around a corner and saw the luxury car pulling up. Mr. Zhang had arrived. Harrison took a deep breath and stepped forward. The staff moved into position, each one doing exactly what they were trained to do. Olivia stopped for a moment and watched from a distance. She saw how Harrison greeted the guest, using his app to say, "Welcome," in Mandarin. The words came out awkward and robotic, but Mr. Zhang smiled politely. Olivia turned away and continued her work, disappearing into the hotel once again, present, capable, but unnoticed. As soon as Mr. Zhang and his team arrived at the Wellington Palace Hotel, everything changed. The lobby, which was usually full of guests and light conversation, was now quiet and empty. Harrison had ordered the staff to remove all other hotel guests from the area before the investor stepped inside. Bellboys stood straight by the walls and receptionists kept their heads down. Harrison stood at the front entrance, waiting to greet the group with a forced smile on his face. When Mr. Zhang entered, he looked around carefully, taking in every detail of the hotel. Harrison stepped forward and said, "Welcome to Wellington Palace Hotel," and quickly opened the translation app on his phone. Mr. Zhang responded in Mandarin, and Harrison pointed the microphone of the app toward him. The app gave a strange translation that made no sense. Mr. Zhang raised an eyebrow and said something else, again in Mandarin. Harrison laughed nervously, already sensing that this meeting would not go as planned. From the beginning, communication was a problem. Mr. Yang only spoke Mandarin, and he did not try to switch to English. Harrison, who didn't understand the language at all, relied completely on his translation app. Each time Zhang said something, the app gave broken and confusing sentences. Once the app translated his sentence to "fish tax too heavy under law," which made absolutely no sense. Zhang frowned and looked at Harrison with doubt. Harrison tried to smile and nod, pretending everything was fine. "We understand, yes," he said, clearly not understanding anything. Mr. Yang looked to his team, whispered something, and they also looked unimpressed. Harrison's confidence dropped with every failed message. He could feel the pressure building, and he knew that Zhang was already starting to question the hotel's ability to handle international business. The tension was clear, but the meeting had just begun, and things were already falling apart. Harrison tried to save the situation by offering a guided tour of the hotel. He led Mr. Zhang and his group through the hallways, showing off the newly decorated conference rooms, the luxurious dining areas, and the private suites. As they walked, Mr. Zhang asked questions, detailed, technical ones, about local laws, business regulations, and hotel tax policies. "What is the corporate tax rate for foreign investors here?" he asked in Mandarin. The app gave a confusing answer like, "High number, no pressure law." Harrison blinked, unsure of what it meant. Yes, we offer flexibility," he said, clearly guessing. Zhang asked another question about environmental safety rules. Harrison gave another vague answer, hoping it sounded confident. The truth was, he didn't know the details, and it was obvious. He looked at his assistant, who looked back with wide eyes, also unsure. The executive team followed close behind, whispering to each other, trying to look like they were prepared, but they weren't. And Zhang noticed. As the group continued the tour, the awkward moments increased. Each question Mr. Zhang asked seemed to highlight just how unprepared the hotel team really was. Sometimes he pointed at things in the building and asked technical questions about materials, safety standards, or construction permits. Harrison gave wrong or vague answers, and the app only made things worse. Once when Zhang asked about fire safety regulations, the app translated it as "burning system approval big." Harrison had no idea what to say. The executives standing nearby tried to help, but their responses were also weak. They didn't have the correct numbers or documents. Olivia, the cleaning staff member, was mopping a floor down the hall as they passed. She kept her head down, but she was listening closely. She understood every word Zhang said in Mandarin. She could tell he was frustrated. She also understood all the technical terms, something no one expected from a cleaner. But of course, no one even noticed she was there. Olivia had studied these kinds of conversations for months. She had read about hotel regulations, business strategy, and foreign investment. Now, as she heard Mr. Zhang's questions, she could clearly see that the hotel was not ready for this level of negotiation. They should have hired an interpreter, she thought to herself. Harrison was trying to guess his way through the conversation, which only made things worse. Zhang was not just asking random questions, he was testing their knowledge. Olivia recognized this. She could hear him becoming more and more doubtful. At one point, he asked about regional tax incentives for Chinese investors. Harrison replied with a sentence that had nothing to do with the question. Zhang's face showed confusion, then disappointment. Olivia paused for a moment as she mopped, knowing she could have answered everything clearly, if only they had asked. But no one ever asked the cleaning lady for her opinion. She returned to her work, listening as the situation got worse. Finally, the business presentation began in the hotel's main conference room. Harrison stood next to a large screen, ready to give a slideshow with information about the hotel's financials, development plans, and possible partnerships. The room was silent as Mr. Zhang and his group took their seats. Harrison clicked through the slides, speaking slowly and using the translation app again, but the translation continued to fail. Charts were misread, key terms were translated incorrectly, and the timing between speaking and translating made everything feel disconnected. Harrison was sweating. He couldn't answer Mr. Zhang's follow-up questions, and the executive team was unable to help. Zhang looked at his assistant and shook his head slightly. Olivia, standing in the hallway with her mop, heard the entire thing. She understood every mistake and every missed opportunity. What was supposed to be an impressive business pitch turned into a disaster. The meeting, once full of hope, was now falling apart due to poor preparation and a complete failure in communication. Harrison felt the tension rising in the room. The presentation had gone completely wrong, and nothing seemed to be working. Charts were misunderstood, answers were incorrect, and Mr. Zhang looked more disappointed with each passing minute. Harrison took a deep breath and clapped his hands softly. "Now let's take a short break," he said, forcing a smile. He walked quickly out of the conference room and into the hallway, his mind spinning. He called the executive team over with urgency. "We need to fix this now," he said in a low but firm voice. We can't let this fall apart." His hands were shaking slightly. Olivia stood quietly nearby, pretending to clean a side table, but she was listening closely. Harrison continued, "We need someone who can translate properly, someone who understands business terms." One of the assistants suggested calling a translator online. Another mentioned an app update. A third person suggested contacting the embassy, but Harrison just shook his head. "We don't have time," he said. The hallway became a scene of quiet panic. Executives were whispering, sending messages on their phones, and trying to contact people who might help. One person called a language service, but the response was that it would take at least 2 hours to connect a qualified interpreter. Another executive found a freelance translator online, but the person was in another country and unavailable at that time. Someone mentioned trying video translation, but the hotel's Wi-Fi was already under strain due to the presentation files. "We don't have 2 hours," Harrison said again, looking more desperate. "They'll leave." Meanwhile, Olivia remained by the corner, wiping down surfaces that didn't need cleaning. No one spoke to her, no one even noticed her, but she could hear all the ideas and all the problems. She already knew that none of them would work. The team wasn't ready for an international negotiation, and now it was too late to pretend otherwise. Inside the conference room, Mr. Zhang and his team waited in silence. One of his assistants checked the time on his watch. Another quietly tapped on a phone. Zhang leaned over to whisper to someone next to him. From outside, Harrison peeked in and could feel the mood shifting. The break had gone on too long. Zhang's face showed signs of irritation, and his body language was more closed off than before. The investor clearly didn't like waiting. The team had expected professionalism, efficiency, and clear communication. Instead, they got delays, confusion, and a poor use of technology. Harrison turned back to his group. "They're going to walk out," he said. No one answered. The room was tense. One executive suggested using a bilingual chef who once worked with Chinese tourists, but he had already left for the day. "We're out of options," someone said. Harrison looked around and realized it was true. No last-minute fix would be fast enough or good enough. In the middle of the hallway chaos, Olivia kept moving silently. She was now dusting a side table and adjusting a flower vase, still unnoticed. But she was paying attention to every word. She heard the details about the failed ideas, the deadlines missed, and the growing fear of losing the investor. Olivia understood Mandarin fluently and also knew what was going wrong in the presentation. The technical mistakes, the misused words, the cultural missteps, she had caught them all. She also knew that Mr. Zhang had been asking serious business questions that deserved real answers, not quick guesses. As she listened, Olivia thought to herself how much better things could have gone if someone on the team had simply paid attention before the meeting started. But they hadn't. They had relied too much on apps and rushed decisions. She wanted to help, but she knew she wouldn't be taken seriously. So she stayed silent, watching as the situation continued to fall apart. Back in the hallway, Harrison rubbed his forehead and sighed loudly. He looked completely drained. "We need to go back in," he said to the executives. "If we just leave them waiting, it'll only make things worse." A few people nodded, but no one looked confident. "What are we going to say?" one of them asked. Harrison paused, then said, "I'll ask for a new meeting. Tell them we want to prepare better and present again, maybe next week." The others looked uncertain. One of them said, "You think they'll agree?" Harrison didn't answer. Deep down, he knew it was unlikely. Investors like Mr. Zhang didn't waste time on people who weren't ready. "I know this might cost me my job," Harrison added, "but we can't just give up." The group stood in silence. Everyone knew he was probably right. Olivia, standing a few steps away with her cleaning cart, heard every word. She lowered her eyes and continued dusting as they moved back toward the conference room. With no other choice left, Harrison walked slowly toward the meeting room doors. The executives followed behind him, quiet and nervous. Olivia stepped aside as they passed, still unnoticed, still part of the background. Harrison stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and straightened his jacket. "Let's do this," he said softly. He pushed open the door and entered the room. Mr. Jiang looked up immediately. His team sat still, waiting. Harrison approached the table and began to speak. The translation app was in his hand again, but this time he didn't turn it on right away. He knew it wouldn't help. He was planning to ask for another meeting, but the words came slowly. Olivia stayed in the hallway listening. She knew that the damage had already been done, and even if they got another chance, it wouldn't erase the embarrassment of the morning. Harrison continued speaking, his voice low and uncertain. Everyone in the hallway remained quiet, waiting to hear what would happen next. Harrison walked back into the meeting room, trying to keep his expression calm. The executives followed closely behind him, their faces tense. Mr. Jiang and his team looked up as the group re-entered. The atmosphere in the room was cold and uncomfortable. Harrison cleared his throat and forced a small smile. "Mr. Jiang," he said, holding up his phone again, "we apologize for the earlier confusion. There were some unexpected issues with translation." He waited for the app to catch up, but the words came out awkward again. He continued, "We would like to reschedule the presentation for another day, with proper support in place." He hoped the message would be received well, but Mr. Ying didn't look impressed. He turned to his team and spoke in Mandarin, not waiting for a translation. Then, looking back at Harrison, he gave a short response that the app translated as, "Too late, not serious team." Harrison froze. Mr. Jiang had made his judgment clear. The damage was already done. The room fell quiet as Mr. Jiang slowly gathered his things. One of his assistants closed the folder on the table. Another began putting away a laptop. Harrison looked around, trying to think of something to say, but nothing came to mind. The team stood behind him silently, waiting for instructions that didn't come. Harrison took a small step forward and said, "We still have more to present, if you'd give us a few more minutes." His voice was lower now, less confident. Mr. Jiang did not respond. Instead, he stood up from his chair, nodded slightly to his team, and started walking toward the door. His message was clear. He had seen enough, and he wasn't interested in continuing. Harrison didn't follow him. He just stood in place, feeling the weight of the failure settle on his shoulders. In the hallway, Olivia watched it all. She could see how quickly everything was falling apart, and no one could stop it. As Olivia stood there holding her cleaning cart, she began to think. Her hands tightened slightly on the handle, but she didn't move yet. She remembered times in the past when she had tried to speak up. Once, she had offered help to a guest who spoke Mandarin and was lost. Her supervisor had pulled her aside afterward and told her not to step outside her role. Another time, she corrected an error in a report she saw left in a meeting room. The manager had responded with a warning and told her to mind her business. Each time she had tried to show her skills, it ended badly. Those memories rushed back now, making her hesitate. If she stepped into the room, it could go wrong again. Maybe they would fire her. Maybe she would embarrass herself. But something felt different this time. She wasn't just thinking about herself. This meeting was important for the hotel's future too, and she knew she could help. Olivia looked into the room again. Mr. Jiang was already near the door, ready to leave. His team was following him. Harrison stood frozen, and no one else was saying anything. Olivia's heart was racing, but her mind was clear. She knew Mandarin. She understood business terms. She had read books about international hotel management and contracts. She knew what Jiang had asked, and she knew that none of it had been answered correctly. This wasn't just about cleaning rooms anymore. If she stayed quiet, the hotel might lose everything, and she might lose the only place where she had worked for years. Slowly, she let go of the cart and stepped forward, One step, then another. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she didn't stop. For once, she wasn't going to hide. She was going to speak. She walked past the doorway and into the conference room, not knowing exactly what would happen, but knowing she couldn't let it end like this. As Olivia entered the room, all eyes turned toward her. Harrison raised his hand quickly and said, "Olivia, please step outside. This is not your area." His voice was tense and sharp, but Olivia didn't stop. She looked directly at Mr. Zhang, who had paused and was watching her with curiosity. She bowed slightly, respectfully, and then spoke in fluent Mandarin. "Sir, I can help translate, if you allow me. I understand both languages and the topics you discussed." The room went completely silent. Mr. Zhang's assistant looked surprised. The executives stared at Olivia like they had never seen her before. Harrison lowered his hand, speechless. No one had any idea that the quiet cleaning staff member could speak Mandarin, let alone speak it so clearly. Mr. Zhang said something softly to his assistant, who nodded. Then Zhang looked back at Olivia and replied in Mandarin, "You speak very well. Why didn't they let you speak earlier?" She answered simply, "No one ever asked." Olivia stood still, calm but nervous inside. Mr. Zhang looked at Harrison, then back at Olivia. He motioned for her to come closer. Olivia stepped forward, her hands by her side, standing straight. Harrison looked embarrassed, but said nothing. The executives exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. Mr. Zhang said another sentence in Mandarin, and Olivia translated it clearly for the group. "He wants to know if we can continue the presentation with me translating." Harrison nodded quickly, still in shock. "Yes, of course. Please continue," he said. Olivia walked to the front of the room and took a position beside the table. She didn't look at anyone else, just focused on her task. The meeting wasn't saved yet, but something had changed. People saw her now. She had stepped out of the hallway and into the center of the room and into a different future. The room stayed quiet, still processing what had just happened. Mr. Zhang stood quietly for a few seconds, then looked at Olivia with a focused expression. He said something in Mandarin, clearly and directly. Olivia nodded, listened carefully, and replied in the same language. The room watched in silence. Mr. Zhang began asking her questions, specific and complicated ones. He asked about local regulations for foreign-owned businesses in the hotel sector, including tax laws and labor rules. Olivia didn't hesitate. She explained that foreign investments in hotel operations had to follow certain codes, and she quoted articles from the national commercial law. Then she compared those to similar Chinese business rules, showing that she understood both systems well. Zhang looked impressed. He asked follow-up questions about contract requirements and environmental regulations. Olivia responded calmly and clearly. She spoke like someone trained in the subject, not like someone who cleaned floors. The rest of the team, including Harrison, stood silently, unsure of what to do. Harrison's slides were still on the screen, but no one was looking at them anymore. Zhang moved his chair slightly toward Olivia. He asked another question, this time about legal protections for foreign shareholders in Brazil. Olivia explained how liability worked under Brazilian corporate law, citing the specific sections. She described how risk was shared and what types of agreements offered the best protection for outside investors. Mr. Zhang nodded slowly and asked about tax structures. Again, Olivia responded with clarity. "There are two main structures," she said in Mandarin. "But for your group, the pass-through model is more efficient due to the treaty between Brazil and China." She even mentioned the exact treaty name. Harrison tried to step in. "She's just here to help translate," he said in English. "We can return to the slides." But Zhang raised his hand, signaling for him to stop. He turned to Olivia and asked another question, this time about operational costs. It was clear Zhang wasn't just using Olivia as a translator anymore. He was talking to her directly, and he trusted her knowledge. Harrison looked frustrated. He stepped closer and said, "Olivia, maybe just translate, not lead." But Zhang ignored him again. He leaned forward and asked Olivia for her opinion on regional licensing policies. Olivia answered with confidence, explaining how regulations varied between cities, but how the Wellington Palace had all its permits up to date, including hospitality-specific licenses. "We did a full compliance audit 2 months ago," she added. Zhang smiled and asked her name. She replied in Mandarin, "My name is Olivia Thomas." He nodded and said, "What is your position here?" She looked around the room, knowing this moment would be uncomfortable. "I work in cleaning," she answered clearly. The silence in the room grew heavier. Zhang seemed surprised. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Cleaning?" he repeated. Olivia nodded. "Yes, but I studied international business and hospitality law. I graduated, but I couldn't find work in my field." She stood tall as she spoke, with no shame. Everyone in the room listened quietly, unsure how to react. "Mr. Yang kept his eyes on Olivia. He seemed to think for a moment, then continued, as if nothing strange had happened. "How would you handle a hotel partnership in this country with a Chinese investment group?" he asked. Olivia answered without pausing. She outlined a plan that included legal compliance, cultural adaptation, and staff training. She explained how customer service could be improved for international guests and mentioned data privacy concerns, referencing recent legal updates. "You would need a bilingual support system, regular training, and a reliable compliance officer," she said. Zhang nodded again. Harrison crossed his arms, clearly uncomfortable. One of the executives stepped forward, trying to take back control of the meeting, but Mr. Zhang dismissed him politely. "I would like to continue speaking with Ms. Thomas," he said. Olivia translated it aloud for the others. Everyone stayed quiet. Harrison said nothing. His role was gone now. The focus of the meeting had shifted entirely. Zhang no longer looked to him for answers. The room's attention was now fully on Olivia. Every time she spoke, the others listened. Even the people who hadn't noticed her before were now focused. Some of the executives looked confused, others surprised, and a few simply embarrassed. Olivia didn't try to take control. She just answered each question as it came, clearly and professionally. When Mr. Zhang asked about supply chain risks, she discussed recent shipping delays, government taxes, and suggested local alternatives. When he asked about currency exchange issues, she explained current trends and offered simple strategies for reducing losses. Mr. Zhang kept asking, and Olivia kept replying, calm, prepared, and without hesitation. Everyone saw it now. She was not just a cleaner. She was someone who understood international business. Harrison stood near the screen, but nobody looked at the presentation anymore. It was forgotten. The only thing that mattered now was the conversation between Olivia and Mr. Zhang, a conversation that was shaping the future of the meeting. As the dialogue continued, the power dynamic in the room changed completely. Earlier, Harrison had been in control, walking through the slides, managing the team, and trying to impress Mr. Zhang. But now, no one was looking at him. Mr. Yang had made his decision about who to listen to, and it wasn't the hotel manager. It was Olivia. Every question was directed to her, and every answer made the situation clearer. Olivia never raised her voice or tried to show off. She stayed respectful, answered with facts, and gave real solutions. She translated when necessary, but most of the time, she spoke directly to Mr. Zhang in Mandarin. It was obvious that she wasn't just helping, she was leading. Mr. Zhang's assistants were taking notes now. Harrison remained at the edge of the room, silent. No one had expected this outcome. But Olivia had earned it. And although she had started the day pushing a cleaning cart, she now stood at the center of the most important conversation in the hotel. Olivia stood confidently at the front of the room. Mr. Yang had just finished asking a question. And now everyone waited to hear her response. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, then began explaining how certain features of the Wellington Palace Hotel already matched Chinese guest preferences. She spoke about how the hotel had private check-in areas for VIP guests, which many Chinese travelers preferred for privacy. She also mentioned the spacious design of some suites and how they allowed families or business partners to stay together without needing multiple rooms. Many Chinese travelers value privacy and shared space, she said clearly in Mandarin. The hotel already has these features, but they are not being promoted the right way. Mr. Zhang nodded, interested. Olivia continued, pointing out architectural elements that aligned with Chinese aesthetics, such as the use of neutral colors and the calm, quiet layout of the luxury floor. Her words were detailed and specific. The investors in the room were now fully paying attention. After highlighting the hotel's strengths, Olivia shifted to areas that needed improvement. She didn't soften her words. She pointed out that the hotel lacked key services that Chinese guests often expected. There is no tea service, she said. In many high-end hotels in China, guests can request a variety of teas at any hour. It's part of the experience. Zhang nodded again, this time more seriously. Olivia then mentioned the absence of integration with Chinese digital platforms. There is no WeChat Pay or Alipay, she said. Chinese guests are used to these payment systems. If you only accept international credit cards, it creates a barrier. She also noted that hotel information wasn't available in Mandarin on their website or in the rooms. Small changes like that show respect for the guest, she said. The room was quiet as she listed each point. No one interrupted her, not even Harrison, who remained frozen near the screen, watching the meeting completely shift direction. Mr. Zhang leaned forward slightly and asked Olivia to compare the Wellington Palace with other local hotels that also targeted international investors. Olivia took a breath and began listing names. She described one hotel known for its connection to tour groups from Asia and another that had recently partnered with a major Chinese travel platform. She explained how those competitors had adapted their marketing strategies and updated their services. They offer Mandarin-speaking staff, have partnerships with Chinese apps, and include simple touches like slippers and kettles in rooms, she said. These details seem small, but they make guests feel welcome. Mr. Zhang asked how Wellington could compete. Olivia didn't hesitate. She proposed several changes, starting with regulatory steps to allow for partnerships with Chinese service providers. She explained the process clearly, even giving timelines for approval. Zhang's assistants wrote everything down quickly. They were clearly impressed. One of them whispered something to Mr. Zhang, who nodded. Olivia had gained not just attention, but real credibility. The rest of the room stayed quiet, except for the occasional sound of someone writing notes. Olivia kept her focus on Mr. Zhang, answering every question carefully. She made sure to support all her statements with real facts. She wasn't guessing or speaking in general terms. She had numbers, examples, and experience. She spoke about booking trends, pricing models, and what kinds of digital promotions worked best for a Chinese audience. Most guests don't find hotels by accident anymore, she said. They use apps and platforms. If we're not on them, we don't exist to them. Mr. Zhang nodded again, this time with a small smile. Harrison still stood to the side, now realizing that his role in the meeting was gone. He didn't try to speak again. His presentation slides, still frozen on the opening screen, had become meaningless. Nobody cared about the colorful charts anymore. The meeting had moved in a different direction, led by someone no one expected, someone they almost didn't let speak. Mr. Young closed the folder he had originally brought to review the hotel's financials. "Let's continue like this," he said in Mandarin, nodding to Olivia. "This is more useful." Olivia translated that for the others. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others nodded slowly, realizing what was happening. The structure of the meeting had changed completely. It was no longer about a standard presentation. It wasn't about fancy language or surface-level branding. It had become a real conversation about business strategy, customer behavior, and cultural understanding. Olivia didn't act like she was showing off. She wasn't trying to take over. She simply answered what was asked of her, and everything she said made sense. Mr. Young continued asking about cost reductions, partnership structures, and how to position the Wellington as a luxury hotel for Chinese visitors. Olivia answered every question smoothly. Her words were clear, practical, and professional. The more she spoke, the more confident she became. The more she spoke, the more the room listened. By now, the entire focus of the meeting was on Olivia. No one was interested in the original plan. The printed documents on the table were untouched. The projector was still on, but the screen hadn't changed in over an hour. Mr. Jiang was no longer concerned with Harrison's leadership or the hotel's previous strategies. His full attention was on Olivia and her knowledge of the industry. He saw someone who understood both the details and the bigger picture. Someone who knew how to connect two different worlds, his expectations and the hotel's reality. And Olivia never once acted like this was her moment to prove something. She just answered questions and explained what she knew. Harrison remained silent. He didn't interrupt. He couldn't. The meeting had changed completely. It was no longer about official titles or who stood at the front first. It was about who actually had the answers. And right now, that person was Olivia, standing calmly in her cleaning uniform, leading the most important conversation of the day. While the conversation between Olivia and Mr. Jiang continued, he suddenly paused and asked her a question in Mandarin. "Where did you study?" he said, looking curious now. Olivia straightened her posture and answered clearly. "I graduated with a degree in international business, with a focus on luxury hospitality management." Mr. Yang nodded and asked, "Where did you do your research?" Olivia explained that she had studied hotel services for high-net-worth guests, and part of her research included 5 years living and working in China. She explained that she had worked with hospitality groups in Shanghai and Chengdu. Mr. Yang seemed interested. "Did you ever attend the lectures at Qingdao University?" he asked. Olivia smiled slightly. "Yes, I attended one of the summer programs there in 2017. Mr. Jiang smiled too. "That's where I used to teach part-time," he said. "Professor Lin was my colleague." Olivia's face lit up. "He was my advisor," she said. The room was silent, but the two of them now shared a personal connection. Harrison, standing nearby, looked confused. He had been hearing Mandarin for several minutes but had no idea what was being said. He finally stepped forward and said, "Olivia, can you please tell us what you two are talking about?" Olivia turned to him politely and responded in English. He asked about my background. I explained my education and my work experience in China. We also discovered we both knew a professor at Qingdao University. Harrison raised his eyebrows. "You studied international business?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "Yes, and hospitality law as well." Mr. Jiang added something in Mandarin, and Olivia translated, "He says he's surprised that I have this level of education and still ended up in a cleaning role." The question hit the room hard. Harrison looked uncomfortable, but tried to keep his tone calm. "How did that happen, if you don't mind me asking?" Olivia looked down briefly and answered, "It was hard to find local opportunities in my field. So I took what was available." Mr. Jiang began asking Olivia about how the Wellington Palace could adapt its operations to better meet the needs of Chinese travelers. Olivia responded with clear, direct suggestions. "You need Mandarin-speaking guest services, digital payment integration, and partnerships with Chinese travel platforms," she said. "These things are basic expectations for many travelers now." She also explained how staff training programs could improve cultural understanding. She gave examples from her time working in China and compared international guidelines on guest communication. Mr. Jiang nodded frequently, clearly impressed. "And what about marketing?" he asked. Olivia replied, "There's little point in promoting on Western platforms if your target audience is using local channels. Visibility matters." The hotel's executives looked at each other, surprised. None of this information had been mentioned in Harrison's original plan. And now, instead of talking about brand slogans or generic services, the conversation was about real strategy, practical and informed. Olivia was guiding the discussion like a seasoned consultant. Mr. Jiang asked her to suggest next steps. Olivia said, "The first step is to audit current services from a cultural adaptation perspective. Then create a team to oversee implementation of changes." She recommended hiring bilingual staff or providing language training. She also suggested making a version of the hotel's website in Mandarin, listing services Chinese guests would find familiar. "It's about making people feel at home even when they're far away," she said. Harrison was silent. His original plan had focused on decor and general luxury appeal, but Olivia was focusing on what really mattered to the client. Mr. Jiang turned to his advisors and said something quickly in Mandarin. They nodded in agreement. One even whispered, "She should be leading the hotel's international relations." Olivia didn't respond to that comment directly, but she heard it. The executives behind her were clearly surprised by how smoothly she was handling the discussion. They were beginning to realize they had never really known what she was capable of. Harrison was still trying to process what was happening. A few hours ago, Olivia had been cleaning floors and wiping windows. Now she was explaining international marketing strategies, quoting laws, and building business proposals with a top investor. He looked around the room, noticing how the attention had fully shifted. He tried once more to participate. "We had a branding campaign in mind. Perhaps we could still share some of the visuals later," he said. Mr. Jiang nodded politely, but his focus remained on Olivia. "Later," he said, then turned back to her. "What challenges do you think we'll face in applying these changes here?" Olivia explained clearly. "The biggest challenge is staff resistance and lack of training. But if there's a clear plan and strong leadership, it can be done smoothly." The executives behind Harrison listened carefully. Some of them took notes for the first time in the meeting. No one was looking at the screen or the original presentation anymore. Olivia was leading everything now. As the meeting continued, it was obvious to everyone in the room that the dynamic had changed. The discussion wasn't just about fixing problems anymore, it was about building a stronger strategy, and Olivia was at the center of it. She answered every question with clarity and provided examples from real experience. Mr. Jiang kept asking, and she kept responding with thoughtful, useful ideas. The hotel executives, who had been quiet for most of the conversation, now watched her with new respect. Some were visibly surprised. Others simply listened, knowing they were witnessing something unexpected. Harrison stood near the edge of the room, his role reduced to an observer. His original presentation was never used. The slides, brochures, and carefully prepared talking points were all forgotten. What mattered now was the honest, intelligent conversation between Olivia and Mr. Yang. And through that conversation, something important had changed, not just the direction of the meeting, but how everyone in that room viewed Olivia. Olivia continued speaking with calm confidence. Mr. Jiang had just asked how the hotel could improve its relationship with Chinese guests, and Olivia began listing several important cultural points. Family is very central in Chinese culture, she explained. It's common for guests to travel in large family groups, including grandparents, parents, and children. She suggested the hotel should create multi-generational spaces, like suites with separate sleeping areas for elders or lounges where families could relax together. Also, you should consider designing breakfast areas to accommodate larger tables and group seating, she added. Mr. Zhang nodded thoughtfully. Olivia then moved on to payment systems. Most Chinese travelers prefer to use platforms like Alipay or WeChat Pay. If these are not available, it creates frustration. She also pointed out that architectural details mattered too. Entrances, colors, and even bathroom setups could be adjusted to respect cultural preferences. Everyone in the room stayed quiet, listening carefully. Olivia wasn't just guessing. Everything she said was based on real experience and deep understanding. Mr. Zhang looked impressed. He turned to his assistants and said something quickly in Mandarin. They nodded and took out their notebooks. Then, looking back at Olivia, he said, "Few companies in the US understand these things. Most don't even ask." Olivia responded politely, "I lived in China for 5 years. I learned not just the language, but how people live, how they travel, and what they expect." Mr. Zhang smiled and said, "It shows." Olivia then shifted the topic slightly and pulled up examples from other hotels Mr. Yang's group owned. In your Shanghai property, you already have family lounges and smart check-in kiosks that connect directly to Chinese apps. At the one in Hong Kong, you offer Mandarin-speaking concierge services. Those are strong points. But here, the Wellington hasn't matched those standards yet. Mr. Zhang raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised that Olivia knew so much about his portfolio. She continued calmly, using facts, comparisons, and insights. Her points were clear, detailed, and directly answered his concerns. Harrison stood silently in the back of the room, watching the exchange. His presentation slides had not been mentioned for over an hour. No one had opened the printouts or looked at the charts on the table. All attention remained on Olivia and Mr. Zhang. What started as an unexpected interruption had turned into the actual solution Mr. Zhang needed. Olivia wasn't just filling in for a translator, she was leading the meeting. Her words solved real problems that the investor had, and she spoke with knowledge that none of the executives had prepared for. "The truth is," she said, "travelers want to feel seen. They want to know that their habits and preferences are understood without needing to explain them." Mr. Yang nodded again. "Exactly," he said. Harrison glanced at the executives, hoping someone would jump in and take back control, but no one did. They were all watching the conversation unfold naturally. Olivia had earned the investors' trust, and the meeting now followed her direction. The discussion turned to compliance. Mr. Zhang asked, "How can we meet local legal standards but still adapt to our guest expectations?" Olivia answered with specific examples. She explained how some hotels lost time and money trying to apply global solutions without adjusting to national rules. Every country has its own way of handling privacy, security, and data. In Brazil, for example, the LGPD governs personal data use. But this law allows certain exceptions for hospitality businesses, if you understand the right approach. Mr. Zhang leaned in as she spoke. "So you're saying we don't need to sacrifice guest experience to stay compliant?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "Exactly. But it takes smart planning and good communication between departments." She proposed clear steps the hotel could take, starting with a compliance review, followed by a localized guest data policy. Mr. Zhang turned to his assistants again. "Take detailed notes," he said. They started writing. He didn't ask anyone else in the room. Olivia had become his main source of guidance. At this point, the structure of the meeting had completely changed. There was no more talk of returning to the original presentation. Harrison hadn't spoken in a long time. He looked tense, his arms crossed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Every now and then he opened his mouth as if to say something, but then stopped. It was clear no one expected him to lead anymore. Olivia, on the other hand, answered every question Mr. Zhang asked. She spoke clearly, never rushing, and always made sure her answers were supported by data or real-world examples. "If you want to build loyalty with this market," she said, "you have to go beyond luxury. You need cultural fit. You need comfort. And you need to be visible on the platforms your guests use every day." Mr. Zhang didn't interrupt. He just nodded, showing he was fully engaged. The rest of the team remained silent, still trying to process how Olivia had changed the meeting so completely. As the conversation continued, Mr. Zhang leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, but not in frustration. He looked thoughtful. "Everything you've said makes sense," he said, "and the way you explain it shows that you've seen it all firsthand." Olivia gave a small smile and nodded. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just telling the truth and offering solutions that worked. Mr. Zhang asked her to prepare a written summary of everything they discussed with specific steps and timelines. Olivia said she could do that by the end of the day. Harrison remained quiet. The meeting was no longer his. Everyone had stopped looking to him for guidance. Olivia was leading not by force, but because she had the answers the investor needed, and now the entire room knew it. The formal presentation had been replaced by something much more effective, a real conversation between someone who understood the problem and someone who needed solutions. And that person, without question, was Olivia. Mr. Zhang looked around the room after Olivia finished answering another technical question. Then he turned his head toward Harrison and asked a question in English so everyone could hear it. "What is Olivia's official position in your team?" The room fell completely silent. Harrison hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "She's part of our cleaning staff," he said slowly. Mr. Zhang raised his eyebrows, visibly surprised. He looked at Olivia, then back at Harrison. "Cleaning?" he repeated. "You have someone with this level of skill working in cleaning?" Harrison tried to explain. "She's very talented, yes, but we weren't aware of her full background." Mr. Zhang didn't look convinced. "That's not acceptable," he said firmly. "Someone like her should be in an executive role. This shows your company is not paying attention to its people." The statement was direct and critical. Harrison looked down for a moment, clearly embarrassed. The rest of the team sat in silence, processing what had just been said. No one knew how to respond. Emma, the head of the cleaning department, was standing quietly near the back of the room. When she heard Mr. Zhang's question and the answer that followed, she blinked in disbelief. She looked at Olivia, then quickly looked away, not sure how to react. She had always seen Olivia as a quiet, responsible worker, on time, respectful, careful, but she had never imagined that Olivia had this level of education or experience. Mr. Zhang's comments made her uncomfortable. It wasn't just about Olivia anymore. It was a reminder that people in the hotel had stopped paying attention to the skills and dreams of the workers around them. Harrison took a deep breath and said, "I think it's time we correct this mistake." His voice was more serious now. He looked at Olivia. "After this meeting, I'd like to speak with you about your future here." Olivia nodded slowly, staying composed. The mood in the room had changed. Everyone felt the weight of the realization. The company had failed her. Mr. Zhang was still focused on Olivia. "You speak fluent Mandarin, know our regulations, understand the market, and have ideas that no one else here prepared," he said. "And yet, you've been cleaning floors." His tone wasn't angry, but disappointed. Harrison opened his mouth to respond again, but Mr. Zhang raised his hand. "It's not just about her. It's about your entire system. If someone like Olivia is invisible in your team, you're missing other talents too." Harrison nodded slowly. "You're right. We made a mistake." Mr. Zhang turned back to Olivia and said, "You handled this meeting better than most professionals I've worked with." Olivia thanked him in Mandarin. Harrison added, I want to understand how we let this happen, and I want to change it. Olivia stood still, not reacting too emotionally, but it was clear that this was a big moment. For the first time, everyone in the room recognized her not as staff, but as someone with executive-level potential. The meeting continued for a few more minutes, wrapping up loose points about regulatory planning and next steps for the hotel's adjustments. But most of the focus remained on Olivia. Yang's assistants had stopped taking notes on the hotel. Now they were quietly observing Olivia, occasionally whispering to each other. Emma walked over to stand beside Olivia and whispered, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Olivia replied softly, "I tried. People didn't listen." Emma looked at her for a moment and nodded. Harrison called the meeting to a close. "We've covered what we needed," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for your honesty, and thank you, Olivia, for everything you've contributed today." The staff slowly stood up. Some looked uncomfortable, others impressed. Everyone knew this had been more than a normal business meeting. Olivia had changed the outcome, and her place in the hotel was no longer just about cleaning. She had proven her value in front of everyone who once overlooked her. As the room emptied, Mr. Yang walked over to Olivia. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple professional card. "This is my personal contact," he said. "If you ever want to apply for a position in my company, I'd be very happy to receive your application." Olivia took the card with both hands respectfully and thanked him in Mandarin. Mr. Yang smiled and said, "You belong in a leadership position, not hiding in the background." She nodded, keeping her voice calm. "I appreciate the opportunity, sir." He nodded once more before leaving the room with his team. Harrison stayed behind. He walked up to Olivia and said, "Let's not wait. I want to talk today, right now, about where you really belong in this hotel." Olivia nodded again, still holding the business card. The shift had happened. Her future was no longer a quiet thought in the back of her mind. It was now a real conversation, and it was finally beginning. 1 month had passed since that important meeting with Mr. Zhang. A lot had changed at the Wellington Palace Hotel. Olivia now walked through the hotel lobby wearing a formal executive suit instead of her old cleaning uniform. Her steps were steady and her head was held high. Staff members she used to pass unnoticed now greeted her with smiles and respect. "Good morning, Miss Thomas," said the receptionist. "Morning, Olivia," added a bellhop. She responded to each greeting kindly. The staff had seen what happened in that meeting, and they knew she had earned her position. Olivia was now the Director of International Relations. Her job was to guide the hotel's efforts in becoming a place that welcomed guests from different cultures, especially from China. She had a clear goal: to use her experience and help the hotel grow. But she also carried another mission inside her, to make sure no one else with talent stayed hidden the way she once was. Inside her new office, Olivia looked around with a deep sense of pride. The space was simple but professional. Clean desk, modern chairs, and a large window with a view of the city. On the wall behind her desk, she had hung her university diploma and framed the letter of intent from Zhang International. It reminded her not just of where she came from, but of how far she had come. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began preparing for a very important meeting. Today would be the first official gathering of the Hidden Talents program, an idea she had proposed and now led. The goal was simple: to identify employees across departments who had special skills or education not currently being used in their roles. Olivia had collected data over the past month, reviewing employee files and conducting interviews. She found dozens of stories like hers, people with backgrounds in languages, design, management, and more. This meeting was the beginning of something bigger, and she was ready to lead it. The meeting took place in one of the hotel's large conference rooms. About 20 employees sat around the table. Some wore uniforms from housekeeping, security, the kitchen, and maintenance. Others wore casual clothes, unsure of what to expect. Olivia stood at the front of the room with a projector screen behind her. She smiled and began speaking. "Thank you all for being here. You're not here because of your current roles. You're here because of what else you know, what else you can do." She showed a slide with a chart that compared job titles with hidden skills. Room attendant, speaks fluent French. Kitchen staff, studied accounting, maintenance, computer programming. The room became quiet. People looked at each other surprised. Olivia continued, "The hotel has been missing something important, your full potential. My goal is to help change that." Heads began nodding slowly. For the first time, some employees felt seen. Olivia knew this feeling. She had lived it, and now she was opening that door for others. The rest of the meeting was focused on next steps. Olivia explained how the program would work. First, employees could submit their skills and interests privately through a new form. Then each department would review these submissions to see where people could be trained or transferred. "Maybe someone from laundry could help with guest communications," she said. "Maybe someone from the kitchen has ideas for Chinese menus." The employees listened with interest. One man from security raised his hand. "What if we don't have a diploma, but we've learned things on our own?" Olivia smiled and said, "That's just as valuable. I taught myself Mandarin before anyone noticed." She paused and looked at the group. "We're not looking for perfect resumes. We're looking for ability." The room seemed to relax. People began to talk openly. It didn't feel like a typical hotel meeting. It felt like a turning point. Olivia saw something in their eyes that reminded her of herself a month ago: hope and possibility. After the meeting, Olivia returned to her office and looked out the window. She thought about how fast things had changed. A few months ago, she had been cleaning hallways in silence. Now, she was building new programs, guiding cultural improvements, and working directly with hotel leadership. But she didn't let that success make her forget how she got there. She remembered the quiet frustration of being overlooked, the fear of speaking up, and the weight of being invisible. And that's why this work mattered so much to her now. It wasn't about climbing a ladder for herself. It was about pulling others up too. She opened her notebook and began making notes for the next hidden talent session. She wanted to make sure every detail was perfect. She believed that hidden talent was everywhere in the hotel. You just had to look closely. For the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing work that truly made a difference. Later that day, Olivia was in the hotel lobby when a group of Chinese guests arrived. She walked over to welcome them personally and spoke fluent Mandarin as she explained check-in procedures and offered help with their luggage. The guests smiled, visibly relaxed by hearing their native language. A few staff members watched from a distance, impressed by how natural Olivia made it look. As the guests moved toward the elevator, Olivia noticed a young man from the kitchen observing her quietly. She walked over and asked, "Hi, what's your name?" He replied shyly, "David." Olivia smiled and asked, "Do you speak Mandarin too?" He nodded slowly. "I studied for 3 years but never really use it here." Olivia said, "Would you like to?" David smiled for the first time. "Yes, I would." Olivia nodded. "Then come see me tomorrow." As she walked away, she realized something important. She was no longer the invisible one. Now, she was helping others step into the light. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.